Welcome back. I've got a question for you. Have you ever been sent some miniatures as part of a sponsored video deal and proceeded to absolutely ruin them with a terrible paint job? Because I have. Couple of things before we get into it. Firstly, this video is sponsored by Ravage Star, the tabletop miniature wargame, and secondly, yes, my voice is going to sound like this the entire time, and in fact there's a good chance that it will get even worse. Yesterday it was approaching like subsonic frequencies, it was quite impressive. But on to these mechs that I absolutely mangled. So, I was sent 3 quality mechs, part of the Immari faction for Ravage Star. Previously, just a proxy model range. This time round, this new campaign on GameFound, it is its own full game with 2 new products, the Immari and the Gorkog. Now, when I was approached by Dave from Mini Wargaming, he said, "Do you want some models?" And I said, "Yes, please. What have you got that is big and stompy?" And he showed me some big and stompy stuff, and I decided that I wanted big and stompy, because you know me, I've got a thing for, that isn't even the first Dreadnought army that's up there. That's one that I've just happened to collect. Like, not even on purpose. I've just ended up with like 7 Dreadnoughts. I only need 1 more and a Tech Marine, and I'm good to go. I like my mechs, right? I like them a lot. And I thought with these 3, I would do something a little bit different to normal. See, I have a very comfortable colour palette. I know where I'm happiest. I'm happy doing metallics. I'm happy doing pink, purple, blues. Love a bit of blue, especially a bit of sort of greeny turquoise blue. But one thing that I've never been particularly comfortable with and have never really got the hang of is green. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to do something different to what I would normally do. Because what I would normally do with something like this is I would just do a bit of metallic work. I'd do some highlights here and there. I'd, dirty them up a little bit. I'm going to go for a totally different style. Maybe even go for a bit of a Salamander's paint scheme. And that's what I started out with. The thing is, though, I love a bit of dirt. I love a bit of grime, a bit of mud on my miniatures, especially on mechanized stuff. I really like them to feel kind of gritty and grounded and not pristine and perfect, except I've never attempted to weather anything as dark as the green that I went for on these mechs. And there's a point when painting where you might think to yourself, this isn't working, and you push through and then realise that actually it's all coming together. That point never happened. It never occurred. At no stage did I feel comfortable with what I was doing. At no point did I think that it was going well. But I thought, well, if I just carry on, if I just keep pushing through, then it should be fine. It'll all come together in the end. And so a good few painting sessions were spent trying to salvage my not at all interesting, dull, dark green and kind of reddy brown mechs, and they just never came together, to the point where I came to make the video and realised I can't put these in. I can't put them in. This is dire. This is bad. This is some of the worst painting I've done for a long, long time. And as part of a video showing the miniatures off, there is absolutely no chance that I'm gonna expose these to the world and give the impression that that's what, those models could look like, because who would want them to look like that? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, that was a bold choice. The choice to go way out of your comfort zone, try and do colours that you're not used to doing and that you don't have much experience in, on miniatures that had a set deadline for the video that you were going to put out. That is one of the most choices of all time, and you are absolutely correct. It was dumb. It was not clever. It also meant that when I decided that that was no longer going to work, I had even less time to make something acceptable out of them. And so what it actually turned into was something of a challenge. See, I had one day, specifically one morning, in which to paint all 3 of these miniatures in order to get them ready and get all the footage and all of the stuff for making this video. I effectively had 3 to 4 hours to take them from stripped to primed to tabletop standard. I think I managed it. just about. Before I show you how I got on with that self-imposed, self-inflicted challenge and punishment for my own hubris, let's have a little chat about Ravaged Star. Ravaged Star is back. The second GameFound campaign is live and is in the last 36 hours or so of funding. The first campaign raised over $1 million for proxies for your favourite tabletop wargame, but this time round Ravaged Star is a game of its own. Ravaged Star is using a D10 system and will feature fewer dice than you may be used to. Everything you need to know about the models is contained on unit cards, and each of those units are activated in a fog of war, so you never know which unit is going to activate next. The game sees the return of the Veil Touched and also introduces the Gorkog and the Immari as two new factions to this brand new universe. You can check it out on GameFound right now. There is a link in the description and in the pinned comment. Now let's see whether I managed to salvage these mechs. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, I've named these three mechs the Lads, and I actually really like the design of them. I have to admit I do have a personal favourite, and whilst you might think it's the big stompy lad holding the giant hammer, it's actually the one with the great sword and the two normal swords and 4 arms. I love that. I cannot get enough. It's so good. And yeah, there's something about the design, especially with the cockpit closed over. So you've got this kind of like faceplate. I just love it. It's great. Question is, did I get them to an acceptable standard in the morning I gave myself, having already messed them up once? First, I mostly stripped them. It wasn't as successful as I was hoping it would be, but it mostly did the job. Then they were primed with black, because that's what I'm used to, and that's just what I do for every miniature, no matter how light it's going to be in the end, which you could argue is somewhat counterproductive, and I would agree. I then went at them with the airbrush and some grey. Just a nice light grey, just to give the white that I was going to do next something to cling on to, not being particularly thorough about it because I still wanted a few shadows and a few bits left a little bit darker. A kind of lazy zenithal if you want to look at it that way. I then followed it up with the aforementioned white, just trying to bring some nice light segments to some of the armour. A lot of it was going to be knocked back later on, so I wasn't too fussed if it went a bit brighter than I was actually going for initially. In a few different spots I kind of ignored the whole zenithal thing and just highlighted individual areas just because I thought it would look better that way. It was actually surprisingly difficult to get it to the shade that I was looking for because I didn't want to go really, really bright, but I also wanted them to be, you know, a decent, at least off-white. Once that was done, I started dry brushing some metals, just some cables, some pistons, a few swords, that sort of thing. Anything that looked like it needed to have a bit of metallic sheen, even stuff that I ended up painting over later. I also realised far too late into this process that I'd started just trying to paint normally, but I'd not swapped the brush out, which was quite the weird choice. At the time, I couldn't understand why I just hadn't swapped the brushes out. Looking back, it's probably because I was starting to get really ill that day. My brain had clearly taken a leave of absence for that like half an hour. I wanted there to be a nice kind of contrast between the bodies of the mechs and the weapons, although it was a little more tricky with the giant hammer and especially with the gun and claw situation on the smaller mech. So I went for my tried and true, repeatedly tested method of just sticking some blue on sword blades and weapon ends because, you know, that's what I do for everything else when I feel like something needs a little bit of colour. At this point, if I'm ever stuck for something to do, I immediately reach for the Huldra Blue and Adriatic Blue from scale 75 because they are my favourite paints and I use them on literally everything. Now at this point, the body was ready for what I really wanted to do. The metallic bits that needed to be metallic were metallic. The missile pods on 2 of them needed a little touch of red because I always feel like missile heads need to be red, I don't know why. And then it was time to weather the hell out of them with a sponge. I've never quite got on with chipping medium, so I tend to do the sponge method. Take a sponge, take some dark brown, I go for Rhinox hide, and then, in the case of these at least, just go absolutely wild, getting it everywhere. I want the paint to look like it's been chipped off, like it's falling off, giving a really good basis for another step later down the line. Once all that's done, repeat the process, but with a nice light silver. I used Mithril Blade from 2 thin coats, it's got a really nice finish to it, I really like it. With the silver I only go over the bits that I've already done in brown so that you get that kind of chipped paint look and you can see the metal work underneath. Some of it is like corroded, some of it isn't. I really like the effect it gives. Once that was done, the next step was to grime them up with some winter streaking grime. I was very inconsistent with this, but it was kind of intentional. So I did certain parts of the model where I just gave it a coat, but left other parts blank, and that's because after the fact, I then used some white spirit and just mixed it all over the model, just kind of moved it around, so some bits were more intense, some bits were less intense. I didn't want an even finish across the whole thing. I wanted some bits to be just a little more dirty, a little more kind of almost green in tinge than other parts of the armour. The idea was to try and give it an uneven finish. That was obviously made a lot easier by the fact that the paint itself was deliberately fairly uneven and a bit zenithal in how it applied it. But I didn't want the whole thing to be the same shade. I was aiming for it to be a little bit more mottled than it actually was, but overall I'm pretty happy with the end result of it. I also used one of those little cotton bud, earbud, Q-tip things. Is it Q-tip in the US? I think it's Q-tip in the US. To just like move it around and rub it away from some areas just to let more of the kind of off-white shine through. And again, I got pretty much what I was going for, so I'm happy. Now, having done all of that, I was pretty okay with them. I felt like they needed something more, but I wasn't sure what. I ended up slopping some Druchii Violet onto the dead Gorkog on one of the bases, added some contrast black to the swords on the forearm lad, and then I wasn't really sure what else to do. But then I had an idea. Now the thing is that this idea was not captured on camera, but when I show you the finished models in a second, you'll know exactly what it is that I added. Yep, we went for some Dirty Down Rust. We had to do some Dirty Down Rust. It's so good, and I love the effect it gives, and I feel like it just added an extra element to these. They were probably a bit too plain before. There was probably not quite enough going on. They were weathered. They did have a nice kind of uneven spread of colour across the body, but they were definitely lacking something. They were lacking like an additional bit of contrast, I feel like, and the rust really helped with that. Now, I did go a bit wild with it. I tried to focus mainly on bits that had already been heavily chipped or weathered during the sponging process, but the end result I ended up just really, really liking. I was tempted to take some of it away after I first finished putting it on, but overall, I just really liked the way it came out, even if it is quite excessive. I feel like it just speaks to a kind of hostile, alien, corrosive atmosphere or planet of these things being aged and damaged as they move around, maybe not even in battle, just being slowly worn down and corroded away. I just love the effect that it's given. So there you go. I tried to fix my mistake in the morning, and I'm pretty sure I managed it. I'd be okay with putting those down on the tabletop. They need a bit more work. They need some highlighting. They need a little bit of care here and there. But for a one morning job to try and repair a mistake that took multiple painting sessions to realise that I was making, I'm pretty happy with them. And of course it still stands that I really, really like the models. The models are really fun. They're really fun to paint. There is a lot of detail on them, yes, especially the big lad. But you know what? I don't think you necessarily need to pick every single bit of trim and panel out. I think you can make them look just as gritty and grimy and dark as you like. Thank you very much to Ravaged Star for sponsoring the video. As I said before, there'll be a link in the description and in the pinned comment. Let me know what you think of that in the comments down below, and I'm going to go away and stop talking because this kind of hurts now.